9:05, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. You can follow me on Twitter, Chad Hasty Radio. So it's been an interesting few days in the Texas Senate down in Austin. They're not even looking at laws yet, and we've got a conflict of personalities. And joining us to get the latest, normally you hear them here Mondays on the Chad Hasty Show, and because of yesterday's blow-up, we had to get them back on the air at least one more time this week. The editor of Quorum Report, Scott Braddock. Scott, good morning. How are you?
Feeling better than I was on Monday, but I'm still working from home. Yeah. It's I think my voice is a little stronger than it was on Monday.
Yeah. You're sounding a little bit more like normal.
Yeah, well, that may be good or bad, depending on your definition of normal.
So we have a conflict of personalities in the Texas Senate.
Oh yeah,
kind of for those who maybe are just kind of now paying attention to this Kel Seliger versus Dan Patrick personality conflict. Kind of run us through where how we got to yesterday.
This is a long-running feud between Senator Seliger and the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. In fact, it goes back to before the time that the Lieutenant Governor was even in that office. When they were both state senators, they both wanted to be the chairman of the Education Committee in the Senate, and at the time, Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst made Dan Patrick the chairman of that committee. So this goes way back. You know that in the last election cycle, you had Alan Blakemore, who is the chief political consultant to Dan Patrick. Blakemore was running a campaign for one of the challengers to Seliger in the GOP primary, and so folks have said that means that either Dan Patrick was behind that, or that he just didn't care what his political consultant was doing. I tend to be one of those who thinks that Patrick was behind it. He never actually came out and said. Dan never came out and said that people should vote against Seliger, but long-running feud between these guys. And, of course, in the last legislative session, you had Seliger vote against two of the big priority bills for the lieutenant governor. Those were the bills on tax caps, which, of course, that's back, and the bill on school vouchers, which does not seem to be on the table at all for this legislative session. So a long-running feud. This has been going on for years. The committee assignments came down last week, and as expected, I think you said it right on Monday, not a surprise to see Seliger taken off of the Higher Education Committee, a very powerful chairmanship, but it is significant. It's significant for West Texas. It's significant, for the senator's influence within the chamber, and he was given a smaller role as chairman of an agriculture committee that was just created. And by the way, some people have said that committee, because it was an offshoot of a different committee, is really just sort of a consolation prize for Seliger. So it's not that. So when the headlines came out yesterday, saying that the senator lost his chairmanship, let's be honest, he had really lost the chairmanship that really mattered.
Right.
At least certainly the one that mattered to him last week. There were bitter words between Seliger and one of Patrick's top staffers, Sherry Sylvester, who's a senior advisor to Patrick. She had said that, look, if he doesn't like the chairmanship that he has, he should come tell us about it, and the lieutenant governor will give it to somebody else. Of course, Seliger had not said anything like that, but he went on a different radio show in your area, and he had said that if if that's her attitude, basically he had a recommendation for her lips and his backside. I saw where you tweeted out, maybe that was a stupid comment, not necessarily offensive. I think the way that the lieutenant governor framed that up was a little disingenuous to say that it was a lewd comment. I didn't read it that way. It's one thing to say that something might be offensive or stupid, but not lewd.
I think if it would have been directed at him personally, I don't think he would have said it was a lewd comment. Right. And in fact, we may not be having this discussion today. I don't know. It to me, making it towards the female staffer, and I got to think also, when it's a female staffer versus a male staffer, I don't know. I just when I look at that, I go, you probably don't want a male senator making those type of comments towards a female staffer. It's just the optics don't look good, and you're not going to win over at least any influence with the lieutenant governor or maybe a few others with making that type of comment.
After the news broke that the chairmanship had been stripped from Seliger, this agriculture committee chairmanship had been taken away, Seliger essentially put out a statement that said, "I should have told Dan Patrick to kiss my rear end."
Right.
Instead. I mean, that's almost verbatim what it said. So yes, I mean, and by the way, I would say, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I would say it's interesting that Sherry Sylvester, this female staffer, was the one to make the comment, in the initial news reports, because she usually doesn't go on the record for the lieutenant governor. That was a little interesting. So look, you have a situation where the lieutenant governor is being certainly vindictive, but I'm not sure that he has a strategy here, Chad. I'm trying to figure it out. So the way that the Senate works, and this is a little down in the weeds, but it's important to understand it, the way the Senate works is if they're going to pass a bill, they have to have 19 senators agree that they will debate that bill. It's kind of like in Washington where the U.S. Senate, they have to have 60% of the senators agree to move something forward. And, of course, this is what's the problem with the shutdown. They can't get 60 senators to go along with what's been proposed. So in the Texas Senate, there are 19 Republican senators. In the last election, you had Republicans lose two races in the Texas Senate, and then they won one down in South Texas, took one from the Democrats. So that put them, they were at 20 seats in the last legislative session, then they lost two, they picked up one, so they're now at 19 again. The short version of it is Dan Patrick can't lose even one Republican if he's trying to push forward a partisan piece of legislation. In 2017, the Senate was like a rubber stamp for him because there were 20 Republican senators, and even if he lost one, it didn't matter. He could still pass it, right? And so on the tax caps in the last legislative session, Seliger was against that, but it didn't matter. Patrick was still able to pass it out of the Senate. And so this time around, and this is something that I was kind of trying to read the nuance of the statement that Seliger put out. And by the way, he was not doing interviews yesterday. Seliger is usually very accessible to the media, but I think, it's a sensitive situation, so he just wanted to do a written statement. So I'm looking at the nuance of the statement. Here's what he said. He said that he was demoted by Dan Patrick because, quote, "I have consistently stood up for rural Texas, local control, and public education rather than trumpeting the lieutenant governor's pet projects of bathroom regulation and private school vouchers." It's interesting he picked those two issues because on the bathroom regulations, Seliger voted for that in the 2017 session, right? He opposed the school vouchers, but I think what he's kind of signaling here is that because of the way he's just been treated, he could not be convinced to vote for anything that is one of the lieutenant governor's priorities. I think Seliger is one of those who, would not have prioritized bathroom legislation, but he could be convinced to vote for it. Most Republicans and certainly even some Democrats would side with the lieutenant governor when he said that men should not be in women's rooms. I mean, that question itself polls very interestingly. Yeah. But my point is that it was the case until this past few days that Seliger might have been able to be brought on board for certain things if he was given certain concessions, like being able to keep his chairmanship of higher ed, maybe have the lieutenant governor get behind the vet school in Lubbock, or in Amarillo, and that is just not going to happen now. So I wonder, and like I say, I'm not sure that the lieutenant governor has a strategy here, but here's what a strategy could be. I think that what the lieutenant governor might be doing is trying to lay the groundwork for later when he can't pass tax caps out of the state Senate. He's going to blame Seliger over personal differences rather than policy differences. And I've heard some folks in the lobby already say, "Hello, special session," because if they can't get all of the Republicans to vote for the tax caps, or if they could potentially get one Democrat to vote to move the bill to the floor, but then have that Democrat vote against it on final passage, that's the only path I can see right now toward passing the tax caps. The lieutenant governor needs some air cover here, and I think he may have just created it.
And we're visiting with Scott Braddock of Quorum Report. When you look into the last legislative session, and I was tweeting about this yesterday, and I still wonder, because it's a good point that you bring up that you can lay this at Seliger's feet. Right. I wonder if even Patrick knew and knows right now going into the session And again, it's all questions. It's all wondering where Seliger stands on the issues. But if Seliger wasn't for the tax caps last session, he's made, to my knowledge, he's made no statements even leading up to this session that he would be in support of tax caps in this session. To me, he was already lost. I could. Even keeping education, would that have won Seliger over? I mean, if he's been against it from day one, even the last session, I don't know how you win him over unless you use carve-outs and carve out his district.
Well, remember, there are two votes that are important when you think about the power of a state senator, and those votes are the vote to move the bill to the floor, and the vote to either support the bill or be against the bill. And I'm not speaking for Kel Seliger at all, of course, but my thinking is that if he had been made to be part of the Republican leadership once again in the state Senate, that he could maybe be convinced to vote to advance the bill, but then not vote for it. So I think right now, to your point, I think Lieutenant Governor Patrick doesn't really have a path toward passing this bill, which is sort of a nightmare for Patrick because this is the issue, right, that he has pushed for this legislative session. Unlike the legislative session last time, Patrick doesn't have a list of 25 or 30 bills that he wants them to pass. It's just all about property tax caps, and the Speaker is more interested in school finance. But it's those things that the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and the Speaker are all talking about. Of course, remember we heard from the Speaker who had said, when he's asked what are the top issues for the session, it's property taxes and school finance, and he just repeats that 3 times. And so if they can't get this done, I think the Lieutenant Governor, he's got to have some way to explain why this can't come out of the state Senate. And one well-placed Republican yesterday had told me that it's very simple. I mean, at this point, Patrick can't blame the House anymore if this quote-unquote conservative legislation does not pass, because believe me, there are enough votes in the Texas House to pass property tax caps.
Right. How important or what role does the governor play maybe with Seliger? And what role do other Republicans, maybe including Charles Perry, play with Seliger to maybe get him on board to advance legislation?
If it's that issue, I think they've missed their chance. I mean, this is so bitter now. Where not only, as we said, not only does Seliger disagree with the policy. I mean, as you pointed out, he was a no last time around, and he has various reasons for that. He thinks that it's not good for his district, that the communities in his district would not be well served by that. He's also a former mayor of Amarillo, so he sort of bristles at the idea that state government ought to be telling local government exactly how they ought to run their business. But I think that I don't know that the governor or any of these other Republicans could do much to bridge this gap now. I think he's gone off the reservation, and I don't think he's coming back.
Very interesting. It's the fireworks already down.
Yes, kumbaya. We kept asking, when's it going to end? It ended yesterday.
To be fair, the big three are still in the kumbaya moment, right? It's just a little bit of a personality strain between the lieutenant governor and Kel Seliger, and again, who knows where this is going to go to? But we had said before, and I think everyone who covers Texas politics and looked at this, none of this was going to be easy.
Well, that's right.
And now it's gotten a lot harder. And by the way, who even knows what the tax caps are going to look like, the House versus the Senate? The governor, we know, wants 2.5%. I don't think that there's, in my opinion, there's no way that they agree on that.
No.
So who knows what's going to happen? Yeah,
I guess the question now is, they do have a kumbaya moment still going on at the top, but the question is, can that be delivered on?
Right.
We'll find out together.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, real quick, tell folks what they can find on Quorum Report throughout the day and throughout the week this week.
Yeah, check out quorumreport.com. You can sign up for our free emails. As I said on Monday, we thought it might be a slow week, but no such, it just wasn't meant to be. So, of course, we were sending out the emails yesterday updating folks about what was happening with this whole Patrick versus Seliger thing. But you can sign up for those free emails, get the inside scoop on what's happening at your Texas Capitol at quorumreport.com.
Yeah, and maybe be on the lookout for House committee assignments dropping today.
Could even be before lunch. We'll see.
Let's make it before 11 o'clock. How about that?
That'd be good.
I'm going to be selfish.
On the show.
I'm going to be selfish. Scott, as always, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you later on.
Thanks, Chad. Talk soon.
That's Scott Braddock. Follow him on Twitter at Scott Braddock.